G'day YouTube. I've been asked to do a gecko breeding video. So in this video, hopefully I'm going to teach you as much as I know and try and get it all in one video. So it might be a little bit long, but bear with me because it's interesting stuff. My experience, I've bred geckos for about 3 or 4 years now. I actually have 2 breeding females, so I don't have a large turnover of geckos, but out of my 1 breeding female, I've bred, well, she's laid 20 eggs in total. Out of them, 18 have hatched, 2 of them were infertile, so they got thrown away. And out of the 18, only 17 actually survived. The one that didn't was skinny from birth and died sort of a month and a couple of weeks into its life. I believe it lacked calcium, so that's another reason why it's very important that you give your breeding female a proper amount of calcium for both the egg laying and also for the gecko itself. If they have a lack of calcium, bad things happen, like baby geckos die, unfortunately. But the good thing is 17 out of 20 eggs, I reckon that's pretty good. It's definitely a pass. So there's lots of life I've helped create. So I'm hopefully going to share a little bit of what I've learned about how to successfully breed smooth knob-tailed geckos. And it'll be very similar for most knob-tailed geckos. So the rough knob-tailed geckos, the different types of smooth knobtails, the Pilbarensis, the Levis, Occidentalis, and the Millii, all these other geckos that I haven't even kept. I've only kept 2 species now. So anyway, so what are the critical things that you need to actually breed the geckos? Well, you're going to need a proper setup from the start and have each gecko that you want to breed in its good environment. So it has to have a cool side and a hot side. These are the basics. Your hot side should be maintained by a heat mat, and the temperature should be around about 30, 31, 32 degrees Celsius. The cool side should be room temperature, and that's at like sort of a normal room temperature, anywhere from, I don't know, anywhere from 15 degrees Celsius up to 24 degrees Celsius. You know, it can get really cold in the winter times. I'm sure your gecko will move over to the heat mat side. But yeah, if you live in a really hot climate, you're probably going to need some air conditioning in the general room, and then you want to have still that hot side within the enclosure to give the gecko an option, so it can go either to the hot side or the cool side, and it can self-regulate its temperature. So that's one of the important things, temperature, definitely. The other thing, I'm going to say substrate. It's probably not that important, but these geckos specifically are known for digging, or the smooth knobtails are. So that you want to have a natural environment on their feet. You don't want paper towel or something like that, because it just won't bring out the natural instinct of the gecko. And breeding females, they need a large depth of sand on the cool side of their enclosure during egg laying time, and this sand depth needs to be about sort of at least 4 inches deep, 3 to 4, all the way up to sort of 5 or 6 inches in depth, or more. I've never seen more, but I've never heard of anyone doing more than that. But if you've got sort of that much depth of sand in their cool side, then they're going to be able to dig in there, make a nice little burrow and a tunnel, and they're going to lay their eggs all the way in the corner of the enclosure in the lowest spot possible. This whole side needs to be kept moist at all times. Obviously not too moist, you don't want it to be drenched, but you want it to be moist enough so it can hold the burrow if they burrow into it. You don't want it to collapse onto the gecko, and it's also got to be moist enough to keep the eggs a little bit moist. So yeah, that's very important to have a good laying site for your breeding female. So how do you get a female to have eggs? Well, obviously you get a male who's in heat and a good enough size, so you want it to be at least 1 to 2 years old. Then they should have matured by that stage, and you'll notice that by the white bumps on either side, just up from their tail, in between their tail and their rear legs. That indicates a male with the smooth knobtails, and the lack of these 2 white bumps would indicate a female. You get a male and a female, you put them together when they're both at least sort of 2 years old and they're breeding matured age. And you keep them together for, I don't know, this varies depending on the breeder. I keep mine anywhere between sort of 1 to 3 weeks, that sort of time period. And in that time period, hopefully they would have bred. And that's all you need. And then the female, actually, it's amazing what the females can do. They can keep the sperm in their body. They have, I don't know the specifics, they have sacs or pouches where they keep it. And they can keep sperm alive for up to a year even. I didn't breed my female with any of my males and was hoping for a year off, and then the next year she laid eggs, and sure enough they were fertile, but she had her own enclosure and she hadn't bred for a while, at least 12, 13, 14 months. So just over a year she had retained that sperm and kept it, and then used them to fertilise her eggs. So incredible adaptive feature there. So yeah, a sort of a 2-week period is ideal for them to be mating, and then you want to separate them. The reason being, you don't want the male to be permanently mating your female. It's probably going to be putting undue stress on your female. You want her to just sit there and focus on producing nice healthy eggs inside her body. So yeah, that's basically it. You pass them over each other, you separate them. The female will self-regulate the temperature of the eggs, given that you've got a warm and a cool side. In the cool side, like I said, you want to have a depth of sort of 5 inches of sand. It's going to be moist. And then she'll go in at night generally and lay 2 eggs in the bottom. They only ever lay 2. Sometimes they lay 1. I've never seen them lay 1. So all the times I've bred them, she lays 2. What you want to do is then check your enclosure on a daily basis when she's about to lay. You'll notice this by the 2 bulges. They're going to be white through the skin of the gecko. This indicates that she's gravid or she's got eggs. So yeah, when she's about to lay, you want to be checking, and then when I say checking, you want to basically, sorry, I'll show you what you want to do when I say checking. So this is my female's enclosure. And when I say checking, you want to be lifting up the enclosure and looking from the underneath onto the sand, and usually she'll make a burrow within sort of 1 or 2 days. Within 1 or 2 days of actually laying the eggs, she'll make a burrow, so it's sort of preparation for her egg laying, I guess. And then during this time, she's going to lay. You're going to spot it because you're checking it, and you want to remove those eggs as soon as you see them. The sand's okay substrate, they might hatch, but you want to artificially incubate them. So then what you're going to need to do is get a container and fill it with vermiculite or perlite, and put a ratio of water in there by weight, 1 to 1. So if you've got 1 gram of vermiculite, you want 1 gram or 1 milliliter of water in there. Otherwise, if you can't weigh it, you can do the volume method. So you've got 1 to 10 the volume of water to vermiculite. So 1 cubic centimeter of water to every 10 cubic centimeters of vermiculite, for example. And this should hopefully keep the vermiculite moist but not too moist. And you want to basically bury the egg so it's almost up to the halfway point where the majority of the egg sticks out on the top. Yeah, you want to keep the lid closed, you don't want any hole. My camera cut me off, it means I'm talking too much. Preferably no hole in your lids. If you do want a hole, make it a pinhole size hole. Really small hole if you're going to do it. The air actually comes in and out through the lid joint anyway, so it's going to get a small amount of airflow, but you want to minimise the amount of air going in and out. And then once you've done that, you want to put this container carefully into an incubator. Now your incubator's got to be set up to, it varies. If you've got it cooler, it's going to take longer to hatch. If you've got a warmer temperature, it's going to hatch faster. There's also temperature sex determination, which is basically if you've got it incubating anywhere from 26 to sort of 30 degrees Celsius, you're going to have an even 50-50 split of male and female geckos coming out. I believe it's even. Anywhere below sort of 25 or above 31, for example, you actually get more females coming out. It's much like crocodile eggs in that sense. So you're going to want to incubate ideally around the 28 to 30 degrees Celsius mark. This will give you a good temperature to incubate. It won't rush things, it won't take too long, and you'll get a 50-50 split male or female, I think. Could be all males, I'm not too sure. So you want to incubate it in either a homemade incubator or a bought one. Hoverbator is a nice basic one that a lot of people keeping and breeding reptiles use. It's just a chicken incubator, so you can get that from poultry stores, etc. What else about the incubation process? So long as you've got a container on the inside of the incubator, you don't really need to have moist incubator conditions because all your moisture is contained in here, so don't worry about humidity or anything like that. In the general area, just the temperature will be good enough. If you're not using any substrate, the no substrate method is a very good method. I haven't used it yet, but I'm very much looking to get into that. You can use something called the Sims container. I'm trying to get a hold of them. I can't. Help me out if you can. Basically it's a container that has a grid on it so the eggs don't roll and fall around. And you put this container and you fill it with water on the bottom, so it just uses humidity and the evaporation of the water to keep the egg moist. But the egg doesn't actually touch any substrate. You don't have vermicular, you don't have perlite, you don't have anything like that. So it's just suspended in midair with moisture. I reckon that's far better than, you know, putting vermiculite in there, because this has bacteria and all sorts of stuff that can be growing around when you're incubating at those nice temperatures. And then that's basically it. You want to make sure you check your geckos every now and then, and hopefully in sort of 65 to 70 days you'll get some baby geckos. Now here I've got two that hatched about 8 days ago. Hopefully you'll be able to see them. I might just come around to the back of the camera here. So this is my setup. It's basically got a wet side and a hot side. This guy came out first. He's really small and cute. So he's a bit anxious. Don't know if you can hear that, but he's giving off a little bark. And this guy came out second, which is basically a day in between. So same temperature. I incubated these guys at about 32 degrees Celsius because hopefully I want females. I'm also trying to test the difference between the temperature and if you get male or female. G'day, so I'll try and pick up where I left last. I had the baby geckos out, so I showed you them. They hatched a week and a day ago. Can't remember what I was talking about, but anyway, a couple of things I might have missed that are important. When the egg is laid and you find it, so when you first see it, what you want to do is take it out. If it's been less than, I think it's 2 days worth, 48-hour period from when it was laid to when you find it, it doesn't matter, but it's good to do it anyway. Any longer time period between when it was laid and when you find it, so more than 2 days, then you're going to not want to rotate the egg at all during the incubation period. So when you see it in the sand, it's good technique to get a pen, or I use a texter. Make sure it's non-toxic, otherwise it might influence the egg. You can also use a soft HB pencil and just do a little X on the top of the egg, or 1 or 2 or whatever, anything to mark the top of the egg. And then basically you want to always have that marked side facing up throughout the duration of the incubation. If not, the embryo can actually drown, which is kind of weird because birds, you have to rotate them 3 times a day or something, or maybe even more. But with reptile eggs, definitely no rotation during the incubation period. That can kill the embryo, or so I'm told. So that's one critical thing you're going to need to do. The other thing is, if you're wanting to make a good breeding season, so to speak, with your gecko, you want to cool your gecko during the winter period of the year. So normally the natural cycle of heating and cooling over summer and winter will do that for you. So just make sure you set your thermostat to about 3 or 4 degrees lower in the winter period. So the maximum that they can get to is about, I don't know, 26 or 27 degrees if they sit on the heat mat the whole time, but they probably won't. They'll probably enter brumation by themselves. So they'll slow down their eating, and then come summertime or springtime, make sure you crank your thermostat up to that 31 degrees Celsius temperature. And then they should come into season and be receptive and be more fruitful when they breed, and they should theoretically lay more eggs. So yeah, I think that was about it. What else about breeding geckos do I need to tell you about? Yeah, that's pretty much it. If you follow these things I've told you, you should be well on your way to breeding them. If you've got any questions, any specific things, I'm sure I've missed out some details that not everyone will know or won't be too intuitive. Please just post a comment underneath, ask the question, and I'll try and get around to answering it as best I can. Also, if you like this video, please thumb it up, and also subscribe if you haven't already. And for those of you who have, thank you very much. I'm up to 76 subscribers, so I'm pretty stoked. Hopefully that will continue to go upwards. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.